underdogs, underestimated, we the ones.
It's the Underdogs back with you. Happy late February. I'm your co-host, Jordan Brenner, joined as always by the man, the myth, the legend, Peter Keating. Hello, Peter.
Jordan, I finally found this past weekend the correct analogy for our show, which is that if I make 187 good points in a show, you will make 211, just like an NBA All-Star game.
Wow. You've been workshopping that one all week, huh?
Yeah, my nobody who lives here wants to hear any more from those ideas from me.
So we're in a transition period in the sports world. Football's over, and our bread and butter, the NCAA tournament, not quite there yet.
We're counting down. We're counting down.
It's and
soon.
Stay tuned for March, because if you know Peter and I from Bracket Breakers, from Giant Killers back at ESPN, we'll have all that goodness coming for you all March. Upsets galore, tournament predictions. Will hopefully make you some money, help you with your brackets, that whole thing. But until then, we've got some stuff to talk about. A little later in the show, we're going to give you some early impressions on MLB teams that could be poised for big underdog seasons at the start of spring training. Obviously, there's a lot to change. There's still big free agents who haven't signed yet. We're going to give you an initial look. I've got a couple bets worth making. But first, we're coming off the NBA All-Star break. It's a perfect time to take stock of teams that maybe are a little bit out of the mix right now that could be poised for a big second half run to get in contention. Peter, the league is stratified right now. We've talked about the historically bad teams. So there's nothing they can do. The Blazers, the Spurs, the Wizards, the Pistons, the Hornets, etc. There's nothing they can do to get in the mix. And we already know, look, the Celtics are awesome. The Cavs are red hot. The Timberwolves and Thunder and Clippers are playing well. So we're looking, we don't have a huge sample size of teams to look at here for teams that could maybe change their fortunes in the second half, but I think we've identified a couple of good ones.
There's some mixing in the middle, right? Especially because in the East, a couple of teams seem to be ready to, or are in the middle of, collapsing despite really, really good first halves. So there's some excitement there in the middle. Who you got?
All right. Well, I think we both gravitated toward the same first team. It's not exciting. It's not an off the radar pick, but it's valid. And it's the Golden State Warriors. They're 27-26. We know they've struggled, but here's the thing. First of all, various advanced metrics say they should have a better record to begin with. For instance, NBA Stuffer says they should have a 55.3% winning percentage, which would put them 12th in the NBA instead of 10th in the Western Conference. So they're underperforming. Second, they're hot. They've won 8 of their last 10 games. This times with Draymond Green returning. Look, it's always a question of whether Draymond Green is going to be able to sustain good behavior. But one thing you can't deny, when he's locked in and focused, he's still an incredibly effective, important player. They're just a different team with him. They're plus 4.9 points per 100 possessions better on off with Draymond.
Yeah. Yes.
And then there's a couple other things to factor in. One, they have the 6th easiest remaining schedule, including the Spurs 3 times. Andrew Wiggins, who's been awful for most of the season, seems to be figuring it out a little bit. Finished the first half with 6 straight double-figure scoring games. They seem to have found this Klay Thompson off the bench thing in the last game. I don't buy that as like a panacea for his struggles, but it's an interesting move. And then with Jonathan Kuminga at the 4, Draymond at the 5, and Brandon Pajemski playing well, it's a different look. Plus,
right,
maybe
Jordan,
Chris Paul comes back.
I mean, what you're talking about is that the reason that they haven't looked as good as we thought does have something to do with luck, right? If you line up teams by their point differential adjusted for their schedule strength, and then you line them up by their standings, there's only a couple of teams that are noticeably out of whack, right? The Warriors are one. So we would expect them to do better just as the season gets longer, because they've looked bad for some reasons that are injury related, behavior related, but also just random. On the other hand, the reasons why they're hot recently isn't just they're happy to be putting together a good streak. It's because they found lineup combinations that are actually really, really working. You kind of blew by Pajemski right there, but Jordan, the reason that it's working that Klay Thompson goes to the bench is because they've got Pajemski slotted in, and he's playing so well that the lineups with Thompson coming off the bench are actually stronger than before, and the starting lineup is stronger than before. I love to look at 2 and 3 and 4-man combos, right? And the plus minus of how adding players to a mix affects the guys who you start off with. Well, with Podziemski on the court, Curry's just playing better. When Curry, Peyton, and Podziemski are on the court together, which is only about 7 minutes a game, but in those 7 minutes, the Warriors are taking 7 3-pointers and hitting more than half of them. Curry is getting so many open looks with Podziemski on the court, and you can't deny that, at least in this burst we've seen recently, Podziemski's energy. I mean, there's a great athletic story, I think, by Anthony Slater, talking about how he has a mix of confidence and delusion. That is how strongly this guy believes in himself, and he's out of Santa Clara, right? I mean, he was the #1 pick, but not a heralded pick. This guy comes in, and Draymond Green himself has said all Podziemski does is talk shit. That's all he does all day. He's come in, he's given them some energy, and he's really opening up because what he's doing is, right, he's playing with real aggressiveness on defense, and he's not being reckless or careless with the ball or doing anything dumb on offense. So what he's doing is he's creating these open looks for Curry, and it's really working. So I think the hot streak is sustainable and the bad luck will even out. And so, yes, the Warriors have one more run in them, I think, here.
Now, I will tell you, they're even afloat right now because they've absolutely beat up on bad teams.
Yeah.
They're 16 and 3 against teams below 500, 11 and 23 against teams above 500. So they're going to have to prove that they still have what it takes to beat better teams. But again,
yeah, but first they have to make the playoffs, and to make the playoffs, they got to beat up on these bad teams, right? Playing Minnesota or Denver is going to be a different question. You're absolutely right.
Right. And do you want to face Steph in a playoff series? I don't.
Well, that's the point. Once they get into the play-in games, or they make the playoffs or whatever, once they're not 10th or 11th in the West anymore, and then you don't talk about Podziemski anymore. You talk about Curry and a resurgent Draymond Green, right?
So Warriors not dead. Anyone else you've got your eye on for a second half run from where they are right now?
Jordan, you had your eye on Orlando
I did.
early on, and they create so many turnovers early in the season that they were a fun giant killer to watch.
Mm-hmm.
There are 3 reasons why I think they've got a big run left in them. One is Banchero. I mean, if you have taught us anything, Jordan, it's that we should be asking, if the best player on a team is X, can they win in the playoffs, or can they win a championship? And superstars matter in this league more than anything else. He does everything. I mean, he is a classic case where the eye test meets the analytics, right? So if you haven't seen him, go see him. He does everything. And if that's the best player on your team, you can win an awful lot of games. Number one.
I never thought he'd be this kind of playmaker, by the way. He's averaging over 5 assists a game. I didn't see that even in the season at Duke, but it's really fun to watch his game round out.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. Second is the defense has stuck. They're still 4th in the league in points given up per 100 possessions, and all up and down the roster. I mentioned to you Trevelyan Queen, and you laughed like, why wouldn't you mention him? Jordan, it's because even the guys playing 3 minutes or 5 minutes a game for this team are maniacal on defense. I mean, Jonathan Isaac is called the minister of defense. He only plays 14 minutes a game. These guys are allowing under 40% shooting. And so it's part of the coaching, it's part of the roster, it's part of the if you will, the culture. It's just their style of play. The defense is going to stick. It wasn't a product of early season overconfidence or aggression. And then the third thing is Orlando has the easiest schedule left of any team in the NBA. Their opponents that they have left on the schedule have combined for a winning percentage of just .435. That's the lowest in the league by a significant margin. So I think they're going to at least make the play-in game. And, in the East, as long as you don't end up playing the Celtics in the first round, you can be forgiven for thinking you got a long season ahead of you.
They're an interesting team. They still don't have a point guard. They've got a lot of guys playing there, but
yeah,
over the next year, that's the biggest spot they've got to upgrade. If they get a real playmaking point guard, and maybe it's Anthony Black in time, but he's not there yet. Watch out for this team. They've had some injury issues too, particularly Wendell Carter. So it'll be fun to watch them in the second half. Let's talk about a long shot title contender for a second, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Team kind of flying under the radar. It wouldn't be an NBA show if I didn't mention the New Orleans Pelicans. Okay. Right now, you can get them at plus 6,500 to win the title, which is below a lot of teams worse than them. Here's the thing about the Pelicans. They're 33-22 right now. According to ESPN's relative power index, they should be 36-19. Most underlying metrics say they're about the sixth best team in the league, not the sixth best team in the Western Conference. They seem to be putting it together now. They've won 7 of their last 8 games, not against the best collection of teams, but wins are wins. 7th in they got a top 10 defense. They're 13th in offense, and it can be better. They've got guys who could get it done scoring in a tight playoff series. CJ McCollum, Zion Williamson, Brandon Ingram. We love our friend Herb Jones. Why not the Pelicans, Peter?
I like it. I like the value, Jordan, and I like the team. There's the only answer I have is that there's a lot of teams out there in their way, and they already know that. You already know that, but the the value in making that bet is certainly there. I continue to be intrigued by the front-running Timberwolves because one of the reasons because they're the only team in the league that does not take any rest days at all. There is no load management. They are acutely aware of how they have to win now. And something else you always say is the most desperate team wins in a given situation. I think the Timberwolves are going to be.
Wait, are you calling the Timber? Oh, you're saying to upset them in the playoffs. Got it.
Yes. I mean, I think the Timberwolves are going to have their, pedal to the floor of the car from here until they happen to lose. And so I wonder about that.
One last thing on the Pelicans before we shift to baseball, Peter. This I find this really interesting. I was on Ben Falk's excellent site, Cleaning the Glass. Okay. And the Pelicans still need to figure out how to maximize Zion, Ingram, and CJ McCollum on the court together. Okay. That's by far their most common lineup. And they've actually been outscored by 2.8 points per 100 possessions with that group together. If you sub in Dyson Daniels for McCollum, okay, their next most common lineup, they're outscoring teams by 21 points per 100 possessions. Okay. Or if you take the normal starting lineup and replace Zion with Trey Murphy, they're outscoring teams by 24.5 points per 100 possessions. So staggering those guys' minutes or just finding a better way for the three of them to play together, I think is the key to unlocking this team's upside.
Yeah, it's an interesting question whether they can do that on the fly. Yep. I want to throw one more value bet at you, Jordan. Right now, the Dallas Mavericks are plus 3,000. There has been an absolute crazy, stunning turnaround in their defense since the trade deadline. Now, it's a very small sample size, but they've gone from 20-something in the league to 4th. PJ Washington has ignited the play of both Kyrie and Luka. What do you do if you have Kyrie and Luka on your team? If you're smart, you go out and you get front court guys who can play outstanding defense. That's what they did. And so the turnaround in their defense is short-lived so far, but it's something to keep an eye on, I think.
I mean, they did beat both the Wizards and the Thunder, Peter. I mean, not the Thunder, excuse me, the Wizards and the Spurs. So
Jordan, you got to start somewhere. We're talking about playoff positioning.
All right, let's hold off on anointing this as, the next bad boy Pistons defensively. But
in the meantime, you can go out and watch Uncle Drew, a great movie, no matter what anyone says.
Yeah, that's enough for the NBA for now. Let's talk.
I bring up Kyrie, and that's enough, huh?
Yeah, let's talk some NBA. So let's talk some MLB underdogs right after this.